Hi everyone, I'm Rene Chiquete, and today we're going to be looking at the Terminator Salamanders that I posted earlier in a different video. This time I'm going to be actually looking at the details, as the previous video had a little bit of a blue light tint that was changing how the colors were perceived. So this might be a more neutral light. This is a much more accurate representation of how they actually look in real life. The first thing I want to talk about is how I painted all of this, like the process, the paints that I use, what I was thinking, what I was trying to achieve, and if I managed to do it. Of course, it has to be salamanders. I like salamanders and I've been trying to get the right color for them, and you can see a couple other videos where you can see that I'm doing some coloring experiments. And for these guys, I tried to do something that I haven't tried before, which was to use an airbrush. Now, why an airbrush? These guys are mostly armor, so of course I was thinking on how industrial painting is done, how cars, how tanks, how heavy machinery gets painted. Of course, having a smooth finish was important. There are some lighter parts up here, and then the rest looks a little bit darker. That's because I was also doing a kind of experiment, because now that I'm using an airbrush, I tried to do zenithal lighting, which means I painted the entire thing black, then I simulated a light source with white paint, and the light source was, the direction was kind of like this, like the light was coming in this direction, and as you can tell, this is much lighter and this is much lighter, while the parts where the light in theory was not hitting, like here, under the arm, under the opposite side on the leg, all of that is darker. And then I did a little bit more shading manually by using a baton black, I believe it was, just mixed with a little bit of Warpstone Glow to sponge a little bit of more shadow. I have to say I am not very experienced with this. I'm just kind of starting out. I'm a neophyte in the painting area, and I wanted to do some shadow but not too heavy, and some light. And as you can tell, there is a dark part which is almost black, there is the green part, and then there is a very light part which is almost yellowish. So the process was all black, then zenithal lightning from the top with the airbrush. I took Warpstone Glow, I made it very thin with some thinner, and after some trial and error I managed to make it work in an airbrush, because this is not designed to be used on an airbrush. The good thing about this is that it's actually a layer. I'm not sure if this is supposed to be used as a base coat, because of course base paints are much thicker, but from what I've seen, and please correct me if I'm wrong, base paint, when you thin them down, they became the consistency of what layer are. I'm not sure if that's exactly what's going on, but at least between base and layer there seems to be a high correlation. Like the colors are the same, just that the paint is thinned down, so you can use it as a layer on top of a more intense pigmentation. And in this case, this is the only green that I had that was the color that I wanted. I've seen that in the Citadel Color app, they actually recommend that you use this, which I just got it. I didn't have it when I painted these guys. And the WAG Flesh, to my surprise, is recommended to be used to paint salamanders, but it's a bit weird. Like, this color is too dark, but also it's too pale for my taste. I like my salamanders to be, you know, a little bit more bright in color. So for me at least, Warpstone Glow is a much better choice. Now, once I did the entire thing in Warpstone Glow, trying to be very careful to not put too much paint in the whiter parts, so we could get this nice fading and this nice natural shade that was created by the, you know, the black and white difference. I usually work from what takes the most paint in the miniature, and then I work to what's less and less and less. In this case, the next thing was black. Now, you might say that it's better to paint the thing at the top first, but because there is just so much detail and there are just so many crevices in this, I prefer to do the entire black thing, then do the gold part, and if I did mess up a little bit, then I could just fill it up with black with a fine detail brush, and then I could put some shading on top, which will make all those nice details pop more. But anyways, so once I had the Poltrons black, I did everything that was golden. So it was this, the little cross here, and finally it was this thing in the knee. After that, it was the gun and also the sword. The sword is underneath of all that is actually lead belcher, I believe. And I also painted the entire gun with lead belcher. Lead belcher is not quite silver as such, it's kind of a dark metal color. And once I painted the gun with that, I thought, yeah, it's a little bit dark. After I did that as kind of the base for the gun, I did a lighter part on the same direction that the light will hit. So I painted this part with Rumfang steel, I believe, which looks, you know, pretty decent. Then the details in bronze color, and then I tried to do some detailing here in the sword just to try and make it look like it's been powered up. The process for the sword honestly was just a bunch of little experiments. I did a little simulation for light with white. Then on top of that I used one of my favorite colors, which is a thermatic blue. That is not a thermatic blue. This is a really nice color and it's very transparent. This is a contrast paint, but it kind of behaves as a shade, and it's perfect because if you put white and then you paint any contrast or shade over white, the white gets tinted with this, but not too strong, and that's important. You let it dry, then you can play around once again with white, doing a little bit more fine detail than the previous one, and then you're gonna end up with like a few layers, right? You're gonna end up with the metal base, white lines on top of that, you get some coloring, white coloring, you get something like this. I'm not gonna say that it's revolutionary or that it's even good, but I like it. I've seen a few tutorials for how to paint force swords, and I don't know, there is something I just don't like it. Most of the styles usually have a part that is like dark and light and light and dark, and it's kind of like this checkerboard, and the coloring most of the time looks, I don't know, a bit too cartoonish for my taste. Also, I've been playing a lot of Dark Tide, and in Dark Tide the way that the weapons look, I guess it has inspired a lot of how I see the weapons as well here. Finally we have of course the seals with the little paper falling from it, and there are a couple of them. One of them it's difficult to see, but it's there. And what I do for this is pretty simple. I will normally just paint them all white, and then I will use a shade that is called Seraphim Sepia. This is kind of perfect to make texture or the color of all paper. And before doing that, I just took a super fine pen and just did some lights, some scribbling, some like simulated writing and symbols. And after letting that dry, then I just put the shade over. I did some lighting in the eyes. I used 2 paints for the eyes. I was trying to achieve an effect that I'm not quite sure it looks as I intended, but I use a couple of fluorescent paints, orange and then a little bit of yellow in the eyes. The yellow actually overpowers most of the orange in it. The base is actually just a lot of astro granite. I think that this is a very expensive way to do basing, because this thing is not gonna last for too long if I keep using as much to do all this basing. So I need to start thinking on getting like sand and glue or some other things, because it looks nice, but it's not gonna last. And also it can actually look nicer, maybe incorporating a little pieces of plastic or like little rocks from the outside. Maybe some sand, I don't know, something like that. There was a lot of experimentation, like I took a little piece of sponge to do all these dark areas. I would just dip the sponge a little bit in black, then dry it out in a little bit of paper, and then very lightly try to put it there. Sometimes I will go too far, sometimes it will be just right. But in general, I think the results were alright. But now, let me show you all of them in all of their glory. I hope the video was informative somehow. I am eager to do some more experiments. As you can tell, I am going through a lot of iterations on the Tyranids. I'm trying to figure out what kind of flesh looks better for them. Thank you very much for watching. This is very much a journey to try and get something that looks cool. So if you have any advice, any comments, or anything that you would like me to try, let me know. I already have a giant backlog of things. I already have quite a few guys that are prime in white, and I might get to work soon, like these two guys. This guy looks really cool, so I may get to work on it soon. But once again, there are just so many guys. I had this Grey Knight prime for so long, and I want to get to work on it. I love Grey Knights. And then we have this guy that for some reason it reminds me so much of a certain bald guy that we all hate. Fuck Leandros. I really appreciate your time, and I hope you have a fantastic time. Also, I plan to do some live streams painting during the weekends, so if you want to join or you have any suggestions for models or interesting things to paint, let me know. Goodbye.